Hello and welcome to Harris County Criminal Lawyers Association's Reasonable Doubt. My name is Murray Newman. I am the president of the Harris County Criminal Lawyers Association and your host tonight. And I am very excited that we have 3 guests tonight. All of them are all running for judge in Harris County. Different benches, different circumstances, and different reasons, and we look forward to talking to them all tonight. I'm going to start like we're playing a game of cards to the player on my left and introduce a very long-time friend of mine, Juan Aguirre. Introduce yourself, Juan.
Hi, my name is Juan Aguirre. I am a criminal defense attorney here in Harris County. I have been licensed for 22 years. I was a prosecutor for 5 years, and the last 17 years I've been doing criminal defense. I'm running for Harris County Criminal Court at Law number 16. People ask, is that my district? And it applies to everybody that lives in Harris County. So if you live in Harris County, it applies to you. It's also the only misdemeanor bench that's up on this election cycle. All the other 15 are up on the governor cycle.
And just to talk about that, you have a situation where the incumbent, who is Judge Daryl Jordan, chose not to run again.
That's correct.
And so you have one opponent in the Democratic primary. Is there a Republican challenger?
There is a Republican challenger, Linda Garcia, who was the first sitting judge when the bench was created in 2015, and she was appointed by county commissioners and then lost in the subsequent election in 2016.
Okay. And your opponent's Ashley Geis.
That's correct.
In the Democratic primary.
Yes.
So, and early voting starts Tuesday.
Early voting starts on Tuesday, February the 20th, and it runs through March the 1st, and then the actual election day is on March the 5th.
Okay. Next up, we have one of my chief antagonists, my dear friend Allison Mathis, who is running for the 338th District Court. So tell us a little bit about yourself.
I'm Allison Mathis. I'm running for the 338th District Court. The last time I was on Reasonable Doubt was when I came up with this idea. Murray actually suggested it after the show.
That you should run.
That I should run for a bench. And I picked which bench I wanted to run for based on some of the conduct I had seen coming out of the incumbent judge. So. And
you also have a 3-person race with that you're running against an incumbent, and that's Ramona Franklin.
Right.
And I think it's fair to say that Ramona, if we were going to be super polite, would say she's been controversial. But in less polite terms, she's been pretty oppressive to a lot of our opinions, certainly to our clients during the pandemic. And I do want to talk about that as we go a little bit further on there. And then you have whoever wins this contest will face Michelle Onken, correct? She's running as the Republican on that.
Yeah. She's the chief of mental health at the DA's office currently.
Yeah, she's been there a very, very long time at the DA's office. She started there even before I did. And last but certainly not least, my friend Jamal Haynes, who is running for 486th in a 3-person race in the Democratic primary, correct?
Correct. I had the crowded race.
Yeah. Well, tell us about yourself.
So I am a 16-year lawyer. I was born and raised in New Orleans. Graduated from St. Augustine High School when I was 16. Went to Morehouse College and earned a math degree when I was 20. Graduated from Texas Tech School of Law and began my legal career here in Harris County as a prosecutor. And currently I am a public defender. I serve as an assistant chief in the felony trial division.
All right. And your opponents, who are you running against in the Democratic primary?
I am running against Roderick Rogers and Vivian King.
Okay. And coincidentally, Roderick Rogers is married to your opponent, Ramona Franklin.
Is that a coincidence?
I don't know if it's a coincidence, but
I don't know. That may be too nice of a word for it. And just for the record, we invited everybody, and we've tried to reach out to everybody. We want everyone to have an equal say on this. Some people, I think there are a lot of campaign events that are going on right now as we get closer to early voting starting on Tuesday. Every candidate who's running is certainly welcome. We are trying to focus on the folks that are in contested primaries, but you all were kind enough to take time out of your schedule and join us, and we really appreciate that. So thank you guys for being here.
Of course.
I think it's really interesting that there's something different about each one of your races, even though you're all running for the judicial spot. You've got one incumbent who didn't run. You have one incumbent that you're running because of who the incumbent is, and then you are running in the 486, which is a newly created court. Tell us a little bit about that.
So that court was created in the past legislative session. I believe it first opened up October 2nd, and Greg Abbott appointed, I believe it's Aaron Burdett to the bench sometime in early December.
Right.
So right now the Democratic primary is wide open. It was basically created to deal with some of the backlog that occurred with Harvey and the pandemic.
Yeah, and they created 3 new courts, right? The 46th, 47th, 488th.
Correct. And all 3 courts got their docket by pulling cases from the other existing 23 district courts.
And the governor appointed judges in all 3 of those, and they're all Republicans, obviously, because the governor's Republican. And but there's only one Democratic challenger in the other 2, and then the 3 of you all crowded in on the 486. Is there any rhyme or reason to that?
I don't know why everybody else jumped in, but I was first out in the race, and so Roger Rogers and we found out we were running at about the same time when we were at a function.
Okay.
And so I knew it was going to be us 2 for a while, and then Vivian King jumps in at the very end.
Okay. And for you two have run races before, correct?
Correct.
And you're a political newcomer on this one.
Yeah.
So tell us, how do you feel about that? How do you feel about being the first time? Is it a huge learning curve? What's it like?
So I really think that G actually messaged me when he first found out I was running, and he was like, I want to talk to you about some of my experiences, because there was a lot that I got out of running last time, and a lot of things that kind of surprised me about it. And that was really true. That's been really true for me too. And I thought it was going to be a lot more difficult. It's not hard. I mean, it's not complicated, but it's hard. The time commitment is big, especially because I have 2 little kids, and I live out in the suburbs. And so having to come to events at 6 o'clock at night, 3 nights a week, is really difficult.
Yeah.
But the actual process has been pretty easy, and I wish more people would do it. We have so many judges that, the defense bar complains about, and nobody primaries them. But it's actually not that difficult. The process that I had to go through was I had to collect 250 signatures of registered voters, which was a pain, but it wasn't impossible. And then I think it was, $2,500 gets you on the ballot. But I mean, I was able to raise money very easily from the defense bar because of who the incumbent was.
Right.
So I mean, it's been surprisingly easy. And then the endorsements come around, and I've gotten all of them except one.
Yeah.
So I mean, there's been I've gotten a lot of help along the way, and I even if I don't win this race, I want other people to take away the lesson that these incumbents are not untouchable.
Yeah. I think that's a great thing to take away. So you did you feel any pressure about taking on an incumbent?
I didn't realize how big a deal it was. I know that sounds really silly, but I was just I don't know, you're a judge. Probably somebody doesn't like you, and probably somebody's going to run against you, not realizing how rare it is. But there's a lot of kind of derision about running against an incumbent until you kind of prove yourself a little bit. And then after that, it's kind of been pleasant.
Yeah. Well, and I think that you're probably your biggest asset is her and the way she acts. I mean, she's given you a lot of help because her behavior. She's definitely run afoul of HCCLA. I know that when I was head of strike force, we had to go basically stand outside of her courtroom because she was not allowing lawyers to come in and stand with their clients before her, and just some very, very erratic behavior that you would think that a judge, a lawyer would know better than to do.
For sure. It's the weird part is, all of us courthouse insiders know all of that stuff, right? We know about kind of the terrible things that have happened in there, but in the larger political community, people don't know about those things. They forget about them. They hit the paper, whatever. But the thing that I think is interesting is that she's not present in the community, and so she hasn't established a reputation. That's why I was able to sweep the endorsements, because usually a second term incumbent has relationships with different organizations that they've worked with and stuff, but she didn't. So anyway, sorry, I didn't mean to
No, it's interesting. So, my friend Juan, you're running. You're also the one person who's running for a misdemeanor bench instead of a district court bench.
I am. So, as opposed to Allison running against an incumbent, I always pick. Well, the last time I ran against somebody who was not going to be an incumbent. They were retiring. The same thing on this. And the reason for that is because I have cases in all 42 of the courts. And I don't want to have to recuse the judge or go something against my clients' wishes that are on there. I don't want them to, I mean, I'm sure they can be fair, but if I'm running against them, there's always going to be something in the back of the head. My opinion is that they would be held against my client. So when Daryl Jordan talked about possibly retiring, it piqued my interest onto that. I didn't run in 2018, and at that time, the judge in that bench was retiring as well. So this time, when I received confirmation that he was definitely not going to run, I put my name in the hat. I wanted to run for the reason for a misdemeanor bench on it is that you're able to get people when they're addressing smaller issues, domestic violence, the DWI, not something along the lines of murder or along the lines of aggravated robberies or anything like that. So you're able to, now, while the probations aren't as long as they would be in felony court, so you could have more of a deep impact onto it, you're able to address the smaller crimes so that the person doesn't go out and commit the larger felony cases. That's the reason why I chose a misdemeanor bench.
And I think you bring up a really interesting point. When you all run for office, and I swore off. I worked on 2 campaigns, and I was like, oh, I bless the hearts of the people that are willing to actually put their hat into the arena, because that's not me. Y'all put a lot of blood, sweat, and tears into these things for a pretty solid chunk of time, and I know it takes a toll on just your personal life as far as just being exhausted and run down, but do you worry about backlash towards your client, whether it be against an incumbent or if you don't prevail, someone that that does not being happy with you because you ran against them? Is that a concern when you're running?
Absolutely, it's a concern. Now, when I ran the first time, I ran against an incumbent. And a lot of the things that Allison spoke about are absolutely true. People aren't as open to you because they're wondering, where'd you come from and why are you running against our incumbents? And it took me aback at first, because I'm thinking, well, I'm just here, I'm trying to make things better, but people were skeptical. And in the courthouse, running against an incumbent, you never know the personal relationships judges have between each other and whether it will affect you in another court just because you chose to challenge one of their colleagues.
Or who might be their best friend or something like that.
Exactly.
What do you think about that, Allison?
Well, I don't have any cases in the incumbents court. And I kind of started taking court appointments about a month before I started campaigning. Because I guess I started taking court appointments. I quit my last job doing Operation Lone Star work in April. And then I started taking court appointments in late April, and the hearing that caused me to run against Judge Franklin was in May. Okay. And so I didn't take any cases in her court, and then I announced my candidacy pretty early. And so I feel like the courts who call me to take appointments are not going to be ones that would hold my candidacy against me. And so that's worked out pretty well for me. And the courts that wouldn't call me are usually the courts that cut vouchers and that I don't want to practice in anyway.
Right. And I will say, practicing in several of the courts, a lot of the judges have been very, very professional, and some are, they just don't care.
Yeah.
So I think it's something that somebody can do and not have to worry about that, because I can think of most of the courts that I've been in, I can list them. They don't think about it at all. So any of the stress, it's more internal than something I actually felt in court.
Well, and what a lot of people don't realize, unless you practice in Harris County, is that, with the presidential race, we have about half of the we have about half of the district courts are on the ballot, but none of, except for one, county court, and that's the one that you're running
That's
in.
correct. Right.
And then on governor years, the other half of the district courts are up for re-election, and the other 15 county courts. And so I guess it's one of those things that if you're not on the ballot this year, it's kind of out of sight, out of mind to some degree, I would think, if you're a sitting judge.
And it's also, I mean, it's also a huge ballot.
Yeah.
There in the Democratic primary, there's 84 races that are on there, and with the way that the machines are set up now, it's like one screen per race. So it's like you're going to have to scroll all the way through. And I mean, mine, if you look at it, it's on the paper ballots. It's page 4 out of 5, so it's several races down. So people also have to make sure that they pay attention to that.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it definitely, there's a ton on the docket, because HCCLA for the first time, I think I heard that maybe this happened about 20 years ago, but the first time in recent memory we've instituted basically kind of a judicial bar poll of the sitting judges, and that thing took forever to fill out. Yeah. Going through the list, and I think we get the results of that towards the end of this week, and they should be out publicized at the beginning of next week.
Awesome.
Mark, if you don't mind, if you'd put a phone number up on the screen, if anybody wants to call in or comment on Facebook, we're trying to answer any questions that you might have for any of these candidates who are up here as we start talking about why they wanted to run and what they envision a court looking like under their administration. So let's start with you, Juan, on that. What do you see under the Honorable Judge Aguirre?
Well, most people don't know that the judge actually only hires 2 people in the courtroom. They hire the court reporter and they hire the coordinator onto it. Everybody else works for a different department. The bailiffs work for the sheriff, the clerks work for the district clerk, probation officer works for probation onto it. So right now, looking at the backlog in County Court 16, there is probably, at last count as of last week, 43% of the cases are over 6 months old. Out of those, 20% are over a year old. So first step right there would be looking at why are these cases so old onto that. I'd want to bring in both sides. I'd bring in the prosecutors and bring in the defense attorneys, talk to them. If these old cases can be resolved, let's work them out. If not, let's set them for trial and try them out on it. And I hate doing this on it, but I mean, I know how to try a case. I've been on the prosecutor's side, I've been on the defense side. I haven't been on the bench, but I know the same rules that are applied, the rules of evidence on it, and the rules of criminal procedure. So I'd be ready to try cases on day one. That some of the screenings that I did, they're like, so does that mean you're going to have docket until 5 o'clock? And I said, if it means getting rid of some of these cases, yeah. I mean, there's no reason a misdemeanor needs to be over a year old on the docket itself. So day one would be, of course, hiring who you find to be competent on it. I would actually emphasize that I want somebody to be bilingual that's my coordinator. And the reason for that is there are a lot of people that come up that don't speak English. Each and every day there's interpreters in the courtrooms. So I want to emphasize somebody that's got the experience and somebody that's bilingual to be the court reporter. To be the court coordinator. The court reporter itself, there's a pool of people that can come from on there. The next step is, of course, reviewing the cases. The third step, in my opinion, there would be to look at the probation cases. I'd ask the probation officer that's assigned to the courtroom to look through the probation cases. Whoever's finished with their terms and conditions and they're just waiting for the timeout, let's get rid of those cases. You can't do it on DWIs because there's no early termination, but on other cases, if the person's finished their classes and community service hours, there's no reason for them to be coming to the probation officer every month just to live out the rest of that. So I'd ask them to do that. So that's basically it. Hire competent staff, talk to the lawyers on both sides to get things going, and 3 is talk to probation to see about what we can get rid of and get people off the probation.
Mm-hmm. Allison, how about you? What is the reign of Judge Mathis?
I think there's a lot of things. I've practiced in a lot of places. I've had a really interesting legal career, I think. And I practiced in Micronesia, and I practiced in New Mexico, and I practiced in Houston and in Fort Bend and tribal court and in the Valley. So I've seen the way a lot of different courts work, and there are a lot of different ideas that I think I think Harris County's motto is, we've always done it this way. Like, why do you do it this way? Well, we've always done it this way. That's a terrible answer to that question, right? And so I think that, once you kind of observe Harris County for a while and you realize there's not good reasons for them to do certain things, you can come up with better answers. So, one of the things that I think overwhelmingly needs to happen is that the court needs to be open more hours. Like, it's ridiculous to think that an entire docket of 120 people or whatever can get through all their business in 2 hours a day. That's just not reasonable. And then you can't get a hold of any court staff after noon. That's ridiculous. This is a public service position.
Exactly.
We should work full time.
And a lot of people don't realize that there are a lot of courts that they shut their door somewhere between noon and 1. And getting a hold of somebody either by phone or by email, a lot of times if you try to do it after 1, you're not going to get an answer.
That's right. And the 338th docket doesn't start until 10:30. And so, I'm not sure how we're supposed to get through the backlog if we're not even working 4 hours a day.
Mm-hmm. One of many complaints about that. How about you? What does the reign of Judge Haynes look like?
Well, I want to do things similar to some judges that have been successful that I've seen. One, I would like to open the doors at 8:30,
Yep.
and I would like to be on the bench at 8:30, so we can start handling the court's business. You go into some courts and the court will be open, but the judge may not be there. So, prosecutors have now decided that they're not going to show up when the doors open. And whenever the judge gets there, maybe some things happen, but I think that's something we can fix. So one, be there early, and we're going to be there until, business is done. If that means going a little late, fine. I don't really subscribe to this thought that you can only have probation pleas before 10:30.
Yeah.
We all, like I said, probation officers and everybody else, they work 9 to 5, or they should. So the court should be there working for people as well. I believe in doing things that make sense. One thing that I would like to start is having a schedule for things to get done. Because what's happened in some courts is that some of these cases have lingered on for anywhere between 4 to 6 years before people get a trial. That doesn't make sense. It's not justice for anyone. It's not justice for crime victims, not justice for people on bond or people waiting in jail that are being shipped off to, West Texas, Louisiana, Mississippi. Yeah. So we have to do something. We have to hold the prosecutor's feet to the fire, get your case together, hold defense lawyers' feet to the fire, review the evidence in a reasonable amount of time, and then let's do something with the case.
It's always kind of struck me that when we deal with all the different judges in the court, there's never a happy medium. You either have the judge that's pushing you to trial too fast, or the one that doesn't care. Right. Whenever you get around to it. And what is that? How do you find that happy medium? How much credence do you give to either the prosecutor or the defense when they say, "Judge, we need another reset"? Because some of them have, in my opinion, overcorrected a little bit on being a little hardcore about pushing it to trial, but other ones it's just like, could you please make the state be ready on this? We can't just have this go on in perpetuity.
And I've seen on some of the courts where if discovery isn't in by a certain time frame, the judge will say it's not coming in onto it. On it. So just like Jamal said right now about getting a schedule, getting it on, and therefore at the same time being tailored, because a theft case is not going to be the same as a DWI where there's blood that's drawn that you're going to be waiting for the blood, and then if there's no alcohol, they're going to request it for a toxicology to be done onto it. But if, simple like a theft case or a fake license plate case in the misdemeanor courts shouldn't take anywhere near as long as that. So they would be a scheduling order, but tailored to the type of the offense itself.
Yeah, I recently got hired on a case in Brazoria County, and I went in there, and when the client came in, he's like, "Here, I already have my reset," and his reset already had him scheduled for a trial date in April. I was like, well, that's moving a little bit quick for somebody that doesn't even have a lawyer yet. That seems seemed pretty interesting. And so, to some point, that becomes a little bit ridiculous. But Allison, going back to what you were talking about the way we've always done things, I'm not trying to share any listserv gossip up here, but a very smart person within HCCLA may or may not have pointed out something that I feel kind of dumb about not knowing. I don't know if y'all were up on it today about when a client is charged, when a defendant's charged with multiple cases, that it's the judge who picks which one's going to trial, not the prosecutor. And I was like, I may have known that once, and I've forgotten it. And I love the follow up to it. Is if they don't want to go on the one that the judges picked, they can always dismiss it. And I don't ever see that. Do you all in Harris County? I don't ever see that happening.
Rarely.
No, it's along the same principles of this is how it's always done.
Right.
I mean, I've even seen where people come up for trial and the defense gets there first and they get the table next to the jury box and the state's like, no, this is my table. It's like, no, it's not. The judge will say, like, this is the whole court is open. There's nothing that says this is your table or this is well, we've always done it this way. It's like, the same thing was where we couldn't get a probation on a burglary of a habitation case because we've always done it this way. It's like, no, things need to change.
Yeah. I mean, it's changed so much since we started out. I mean, the different rules. But I may have been guilty as a prosecutor of claiming that seat on more than one occasion. But, I don't know why. I thought that me being closer to the jury would make them like me more. Usually it's the opposite when it comes to me, at least. But, yeah, I mean, I think that that's a very interesting point. That there are a lot of different things that we just look at as, oh, that's just how we do it, and you don't have to. And I think that's changed over the past 20 years. I mean, I'm coming up on 25 years of doing this, and I'm feeling really, really old on that. But
you look really old.
I know, and I'm not even the oldest person at the table. But I promised that I wasn't going to make any age jokes today. But
The term archaic.
yeah. But like right now, I mean, because Juan, you're what, maybe a year or two behind me at the DA's office.
Yeah, started in 01. Yeah.
It looks nothing like when you and I were there as far as the rules and how stringent. I mean, I remember, us laughing off the idea of Rick Court, for instance, as being, some sort of, hug a thug type program, like, oh, let's all cry for and now that's not even, I mean, that's such a great resource that nobody blinks at. And this is a direction that has changed in our time, and it kind of gives you hope that things can change more. So what are things that you all would like to see change just as general principle?
We needed social workers. So one of the things that is different about being private practice and taking court appointments as opposed to working at the PD's office is that the PDO has access to social workers, client advocates who are kind of like employees who are able to help out clients in social worky sort of ways, and other holistic resources that court-appointed attorneys don't have access to. And so I think there are some ways within the current system that we could provide some of those things. Like I think you could make it more routine to approve like a mitigation expert and actually have it be a social worker who's providing answers to some of the problems for a lot of these clients earlier on in the case. But I mean, ideally, I think one of the things I would advocate for is a holistic services office that indigent attorneys could access that aren't just part of the PDO.
I like that you bring that up because of the fact, like recently I had a defendant, a client who had some severe mental health issues onto it, and he was on the mental health floor at the jail. And on this, in the misdemeanor side aspect of it, the PD's office will deal with, the public defender's office will deal with people that have mental health onto it, and that's typically where they're appointed. This was actually a retained case onto it. And so I used the public defender's office. I called Roger and I called Curtis onto it, and they got me connected with who I needed to get in contact with at the Harris Center, which leaves the aspect of there's nothing to address mental health in the misdemeanor courts. I know that Judge Andrews is trying to develop the model into working a mental health docket, but all the mental health, it's all in the felony side. So you do have felony mental health courts. I think there's 3 of them in the felony side, but on the misdemeanor side, there's not. And yet, most of some of these crimes that deal with mental health, for example, a lot of the trespassing, people hanging out at the bus stops, people sleep outside the convenience stores. It's because they're homeless or because they have some kind of mental health issues, and the easy way out is plead them to time served and they get out, but that's an issue that they develop all of a sudden they get a criminal history that's on there. Even if they have a criminal history, you're not addressing the root of the problem on there, which is what needs to be done to address services for mental health. Luckily enough, we were connected with the Harris Center, and when we did that, we were able to provide services, at least temporarily, for my client until his father came down from Connecticut and was able to transfer him into a mental health hospital. But working through the resources that were available at the public defender's office, I was able to do that. But yes, having an aspect of what needs to be addressed on that, yes, that really would help.
I think so too.
We have gotten some questions in addition to my 18-year-old saying the bald dude is killing it. But JV, our regular host here, has had some great questions. He wanted to know what you all's position was on ERD trying cases that originate in a court. First of all, why don't you explain what ERD is?
It's the emergency relief docket. It's had many names over the years. It was state jail impact docket at one point. That went away and it changed into the capital impact docket. And now it went away and it came back after, I want to say was it Harvey? Yeah. As the emergency relief docket to help deal with some of the backlog. So judges could forward cases there for trial settings. So the current situation we have now is that cases are being sent there and you have this huge number of cases pending on ERD's docket, and you have some of these home courts that are not in trial. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't make sense because of the way the priority was set up statutorily. Any sex case that involved, or a case that involved a complainant under 14 would get priority, even over people who are in custody. So you have, sex assault of a child that gets sit there, it will bump a capital murder. It will bump a murder. And it keeps happening over and over again. So you end up with now this backlog shifting from some of the district court dockets to an ERD docket. So I think it makes sense for judges to try their own cases. You have more courts available. Let judges do what they were elected to do.
That's right. And we've got these associate judges now. And so if the court's in trial and you can't hold your regular docket, an associate judge can hold regular docket, I feel like. Right. So, I'm not really sure. And they've done that in Fort Bend forever. Yes. They've had associate judges in Fort Bend who hear minor bond issues and stuff like that while the other courts are in trial. And I feel like that's what the public elects us to do, is to preside over trials. Mm-hmm. That's what they think of when they think of what a judge does.
Yeah. There's some other courts, for example, Judge Martinez in the 179th, when she's in trial, she will send hearings or regular docket up to the associate judges. Judge Lacayo has been doing that as well from the 182nd recently, as opposed to in the misdemeanor side. The misdemeanor, the emergency docket can pick a jury, but because they're not the elected official, they can't try the case.
Right.
So it goes back to the court itself, but they don't actually hold the trial. They can help select the jury, but that's about it.
JV's killing it with some great questions right now online. Another one, one of the things when we talk about ERD is that we're dealing with judges who are either retired or were unelected who are sitting on those dockets. How do we feel about that? And if this is going to affect one of your clients, you can plead the fifth, I guess, at this point, because I think we've all had a case that's gone to the emergency docket, but it's...
I'll say as a lawyer, it is difficult to advise a client on what to do in ERD because your decision will be based on the personality that's there that day.
Right.
And so I think one thing that's good for courts is consistency, sure. Which is why I believe the home court should be the ones handling it. The visiting judge statute, it's been there for a while. If we can get that changed in the legislature, that would be something that, I guess people could advocate for, but I think we're stuck with the system as is now with, Susan Brown or someone else deciding who those visiting judges are and, where they're going to go.
And I think it's interesting, and I'm not trying to be disrespectful to any of those judges that do sit on the ERD, but a lot of the judges that are there they're largely Republicans that were judges in the 80s or the 90s or early 2000s, and they have very different attitudes about the criminal justice system than what we have now. And what we've elected. And you're right, it's interesting because people do have to realize that a lot of times the way we advise our clients depends on what judge we're dealing with. There are some times where you could have the exact same set of facts, but the advice you give your client could be completely different in one court than it would be in another. And that is something that's concerning, obviously. I'm curious, and I don't know the answer to this. Is it mandatory that judges do have to send a certain amount of their cases to ERD? I mean,
I don't think so.
Or can you keep them all to yourself if you want to?
I'm not aware of a statute that requires people to send their courts to, ERD. I do know that judges have the option to try all their own cases. I believe there are a couple judges that do try all their own cases and do not use, ERD.
Another great JV question. I should have just let JV take over today.
Right.
These are fantastic
sure.
judges. But he says, how do you feel about mental health patients and PR bonds?
That's the question. I'll go ahead and take that on.
Everybody gets to answer this one. You just go first, and then we'll that was terrible.
I'll run it. Right.
They can improve on
just
yours.
like poker.
Right.
So that's the dilemma onto it is, if the person can be released to some facility, for example, like we got it coordinated through the Public Defender's Office to go to the Harris Center. If I believe that there's going to be some kind of treatment, then yes, that's fine. If not, then we get some kind of evaluation done expedited. And I'm not talking about having to do, weeks and months for them to have an evaluation to be done to address the mental health issue. But so many times, if a person has mental health problems, they're released on a PR bond, they don't show back up to court because of the mental health issues, because they're homeless, because they don't have the resources to take somebody to take them back to court onto it. So once again, developing the social work system and developing a method into addressing. Right now, the Harris County Jail is the largest mental health treatment facility in the state of Texas, and it shouldn't be that. The person should not be locked up just because they have mental health issues. If we can find them the treatment, if we can find them some kind of temporary release to be released into a facility, yeah, absolutely, onto it. But that's the dilemma is what are we going to do? And each case needs to be addressed individually.
What do you think, Allison?
Yeah, I agree that it needs to be an individual assessment because the question itself is too broad, right? And I also think, I think we've probably all had clients who were released on a PR bond on a misdemeanor trespass, and then they have a warrant out because they don't show up to court, and then they get rearrested, and now they have a felony drug case because they had some dope in their pocket, right? Because they got rearrested on the warrant. And so I've had a client actually not that long ago who was arrested on a criminal trespass and got PR bonds like 3 times after he kept failing to appear. And so when he finally got me appointed to him, he was like, why did they keep letting me out? I didn't have a way to get back to court. And now I've ended up doing 8 days in the county jail over being rearrested several times instead of just sitting out the weekend and having been done with it on Monday because they kept letting me go. And so I think part of it is making the assessment of whether or not the person can make a decision for themselves and telling them, look, do you want me to give you a PR bond or do you want to stay in, right? I mean, I've had many clients who unfortunately are in the position where they would rather stay in for whatever reason. And I think we have to prefer dignity in that position and ask them if they're capable of making that decision, ask them what they want to do.
So I agree. It absolutely case by case. And I say this because I've done bail hearings at the Public Defender's Office, and there are some people that you see during bail hearings and they are not there today. Physically they're there, but mentally they're somewhere else. And so I think trying to determine, what phase somebody's in with their mental health issues could affect whether somebody should or should not receive a personal bond. If we have somebody who we believe may be incompetent as they're standing in front of us, I don't see how giving them a personal bond may help them if they're not comprehending what we're saying. However, people who are on that other end where it just may be a slight medication adjustment issue, right, it's a factor that should be considered. But it's not the sole factor.
So I found a guy, actually I was at a commissioner's court meeting and there was a woman there whose son had been released from the Harris County Jail on a PR bond, and he had extreme mental health problems and he was very autistic, and he was released and she couldn't find him. And so nobody had notified her. He didn't know how to contact her. Really, it was like a 4-year-old child being released onto the streets of downtown. And so we managed to get the footage outside the jail, and he was actually out there for 4 days.
Oh man.
By himself, kind of people were bringing him water and gave him some food and stuff, and he didn't really know. And then he kind of just disappeared, and we actually managed to find him. But yeah, I mean, there's all kinds of kind of horror stories about when it's not like narrowly tailored to the individual client.
Yeah, and that's when you bring that up. I mean, the client that I recently had in the past couple of weeks, I worked with the felony to dismiss his burglary of a habitation case. Of course, it was vacant place, so there wasn't an issue of a complainant on it. However, in the misdemeanor court where he was on probation for, I was able to coordinate through the Harris Center and Judge Jackson in Court 10, to be released only to the
Right.
Harris Center, so that they just don't open the doors on it. And that was a dilemma, because my client would have his probation finished and he would be out in the free world, and his father was not going to be able to get him in time to come in from Connecticut onto it. So we had him do the release only to the Harris Center, and they have to give the name of the person, a phone number, and the time that they're coming, so that they don't release him, just open the doors, or else my client would probably be either wandering the streets, or because he also had some bad health issues, could have just died on the streets.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've all had that client that, when we came to court, we were really pleasantly surprised that they found it. And, and a lot of times it's not because they, wanted to flee the charges. It's just they didn't know what better to do, or how to get there, or what the details were. And it's funny because we all, I also have clients that are highly educated, and every time it's court time, now where do I go again, what floor do I go, and it's a confusing mess. I mean, half the time I have to look up to see what floor of court's on myself.
It goes with your age. Yeah.
It does. Well, it does go with my age, and it also they've messed it up by adding these 480 series ones, because I used to be able to just do the math and count down what's on what floor, but now they've just thrown it totally askew at this point.
482 and 86 are on 14. The other ones are on 20.
Yeah, that doesn't help me. I'm not a math major, so we have about 15 minutes left, and I'm really appreciative of you guys coming. What all, I want to give you all the opportunity to say what you want to say about your campaign, and if something that you would share that you think's the most important thing for a voter to know about you going into the poll. So let's start with you.
Sure. About me and my theory, or how I believe people should be treated. Like I said, I'm a public defender. I represent anyone who is in front of me. That means people who are homeless, all the way to people who, may have nice jobs but are essentially working poor. And one thing that's important for me in my practice is to make sure that people see my client as a human being. And I believe that any judge that's going to sit on the bench shouldn't care where a person comes from, what they look like, how much money they have in their pocket. They're a human being first, and that's how they deserve to be treated in court. And by doing that, like I said, we restore the dignity back into this system. And once we're there, we can then work on other things. Because what's been happening in some courts, I mean, people come and watch the courts, and several people from the community aren't happy with how they see people being treated. And you see it every day. Sometimes people get yelled at just for, being there a little bit late, or because they may not understand what's going on. And those are, the realities of what happens whenever you deal with people. So we treat people like people, and then we figure out the rest. Due process is important. If we're going to take people's rights away, we need to make sure we have hearings that, reflect the severity of the rights they're going to lose. People should make decisions just because. It doesn't matter what, news articles say, or, what reporters outside. A judge is supposed to hear the evidence and make a decision based on the weight of the evidence and the credibility of the evidence. So what I want people to know about me is that that's something I plan on doing every single day, treating people like human beings and making decisions based on the evidence that's in front of me.
Allison?
So I guess, I got into this because I felt really strongly that the incumbent couldn't go unchallenged again. And that's its own thing. But as I've been doing this, and as this has become more and more likely, as my campaign has gained a lot of steam, I've kind of realized the things about me that I think would make a good jurist, right? I think I care about what the law is. I think I'm creative. I think I'm compassionate. But one of the things that I'm concerned about and that I want to address on this show because of who its audience is that, like, I am part of the defense bar, and I know that being a judge changes that role, and I won't be an advocate anymore. Or at least I won't be an advocate for a defendant. I'll be an advocate for the system to be better. But, like, one of the things that terrifies me about the prospect of becoming a judge is that I won't have this community anymore, right? This is the community that took me through my life in Micronesia when I was a baby lawyer and I didn't know what I was doing, and John Bradley was there, and I barely had internet access, and David Ryan came and visited me, and Mark Bennett sent me cookies, and Janie Maselli sent me a bunch of CLEs. Like, this is what sustained me for the last 11 years, and I watch all of us go into courtrooms and the judge makes a stupid joke and everybody laughs like it's so funny, and nobody will, like, bother to tell the judge, like, hey, this whatever you're doing isn't working. And half the time, like, people be complaining on the listserv and it'll be like, has anybody talked to the judge about it? And the answer is no, right? Nobody wants to whisper about it. And so, like, that's my biggest fear, is that I'm not going to have the defense bar to tell me and give me feedback, honest feedback, about what's working and what's not working in the courtroom. And I desperately need that, and I know that. So if you want to help me, that's what you can do, is just be honest with me about what's going on. I don't want to have, like, an HCCLA, like, envoy. I want everyone to be my envoy. Like, this is like our bench, right?
Well, I'm glad you mentioned it because I have a list for you. But,
okay. Is there a check with it?
All right. No, I think that's great. Juan?
So, I mean, you know my story. You were actually my chief when I was in JP court a long time ago onto it. So this is a second career for me, being a lawyer. For 7 years, I worked for the city of Del Rio, which is my hometown, onto it. I worked for the city government, and sometimes, police, fire, public works, engineering were all under me onto it. Sometimes you'd show up to a scene, and I was there, and I was not the person that was just going to be directing people. I was helping out. I'm a hands-on kind of guy onto it, and that came from a strong work ethic of growing up poor. Sometimes we were on public assistance onto it. My dad was a janitor at the courthouse. That's how I got my first exposure into law, being able to go follow him to the courthouse to go clean up, but we'd watch what trials were going on. That piqued my interest onto it. So I bring the same strong work ethic to me today onto it. My clients will tell you that, before their court date is coming up, at least a couple of days, if not a week before, I'm texting them, hey, reminder, tomorrow you have court, or this coming Tuesday you have court. It's in the 179th, it's on the 18th floor, they start at 9 a.m., you need to be there. Or the same token, your court date's coming up and it's on this day. However, your appearance is not required. We're still investigating the issues on this case. And so just today, a young lady from the public defender's office asked for my opinion on a case. Client was charged with burglary of a habitation. She says, but it's a vacant structure. Can you help me out? The judge wants to find case law. And so we, just pulled off to one of the sides of the witness rooms. I had nothing to do with that case. I had nothing to do with the court. I actually walked into the wrong court onto it, but I was like helping her out. And that's been a welcome strategy, that people know me, people trust me, people respect me onto it. Today, I got appointed on a case in misdemeanor court. It was a gun case, and I read through the DIM summary, I read through the police report. I'm talking to my intern, I usually get third-year law students from Thurgood, and I said, so what do you think the issues are on here? And it's like, well, they're saying that he's walking in the street where a sidewalk is provided. Is that really the law? And I said, it's the law. And I said, let's go to Google Maps, and we looked at Google Maps on it. There was no sidewalk. The Google Maps showed no sidewalk. And she says, what are we going to do? And I said, well, we'll talk to the prosecutor first, and if he decides that he still wants to proceed on it, then we'll ask for probable cause onto it. And when I spoke with the prosecutor, he's like, really? This is the reason for this stop? I was like, yeah. And what's the issue? And I said, look at the pictures. look on Google Maps. And he was like, yeah, there's no sidewalk. I'm dumping this. And so sometimes I'm like overly calm. And so I turned around and I told my intern, I said, so do you think that person would have been receptive to me if I had just gone up to him and said, you need to dump this shit because it's bad? No. They listened to me because this specific prosecutor knows me when he was in felony court, knew me when he was in misdemeanor court, and so he knows me and entrusts me onto it. So I didn't even have to bother to go ask for probable cause. Knowing the trust, the honor, the respect that I have, not just from the defense and not just from the prosecutors, but from the bench as well, I want to make sure that that follows through the people that are in my court. One of the judges that I really admire on that right now is Judge Rodriguez in Court 13. I've known Judge Rodriguez for 25 years. Since I was a 1L, we met at a softball tournament. And I've known him ever since. When we're out here having a beer or having dinner, it's Raul. But the moment I walk into the courtroom, Mr. Aguirre, good morning, how are you doing? And he addresses Mr. Haynes, how are you doing? Ms. Mathis, how are you? So it is with that trust and the respect that's given. So just like Jamal said, treat each person like a human and work from there to find the solution. So I will bring that to the bench, and I think that really puts me in a different perspective and of a lot of the judges that are currently on there now, and I hope that does help.
You mentioned Judge Rodriguez. I'm a big fan of his as well. So we still have about 6 minutes, so I was going to ask you, and I think we may already know your answer, but like what judge do you find that you admire the most, or that you would like to, if you were going to model yourself after, who would you pick?
Two of them.
Okay.
Rodriguez, because of the trust and respect that he has from everybody, and the mutual trust and respect that he does to them as well. The second one is Ana Martinez. I think she's the hardest working judge at the courthouse. I've been in trial, or I've been in hearings where I'm leaving, at 5 o'clock, and I see her in the elevator, or I see her going out the driveway, and I say, "Hey, you guys in trial?" "Nope, we just finished up docket." And she's always available. She will take the lunch break. She will take, the lunch break from 12:30 to 1, but comes back and this continues with the docket. Just like Allison and Jamal said, there's nothing that says that docket needs to end at 12:30 or 12 or even 11. Some dockets end that early. Finish the docket. Address what needs to be addressed. Don't just kick the can down the road. So Judge Martinez and Judge Rodriguez.
All right. Allison, do you have anybody you would name?
Yeah, I love Kristen Guinea. I think she's fantastic. I think her court is run really efficiently. I think she's always on the bench. She's fantastic. I love her, and I also really love Chris Morton. Those are my two.
Okay.
So
Pressure's on.
Sure. One judge I truly admire for how he handled his docket, not necessarily the speed, but how he dealt with people, Herb Ritchie.
Okay.
He was pleasant and kind to everyone. He was also one of the smartest people in the room.
He was that.
He'd always give you a deferred.
Always. And one thing I appreciated in trials, he let lawyers be lawyers.
Yeah.
Yep.
He didn't put his thumb on the scale.
Mm-hmm.
Another would have to be a judge by the name of Juan Vasquez. He's a federal tax court judge.
Okay.
He married me and my wife. And I've gotten to know him over the years and how he talks about handling his dockets, because he grew up, poor in San Antonio. And he says that, you can't forget where you're from. And you have to remember, when people come to court, they may be there, a little late. They may not be there, properly dressed, but they're there. So let's handle the business, of the court and not worry about, some things that happen, which are essentially what, we call poor people's problems. That meant a lot to me, because some judges, not necessarily here in Harris County, but just in general, they lose that common touch.
Yeah.
And it's important that, if you're going to have this position of public trust, you have to, keep the common touch.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think about it, Juan and I started, you were a minute late for court. If you were lucky, you just went to the jury box and sat there all morning, and if you weren't, you got your bond revoked, and that doesn't happen anymore, at least in the vast majority of courts. It may happen here in a couple of random outliers, but hopefully we can change that as we go along. So you guys have got 2 very busy weeks ahead of you. Are y'all going to be working the polls and taking some time off to go out there and press the flesh?
I don't think we get the benefit of taking time off, do we?
No, I mean, like I said, I still have a job that I have to go to every day.
Yeah.
I mean, I may be able to take some vacation time, but like I said, I still am responsible for, being there for a team of lawyers. So I'm going to have to do that. And whenever I am off of work, do what I have to do to try and get people to vote for me.
Yeah, it's a lot. I only have secondhand experience having gone out there for a friend that was running, and it's a lot. And I usually try to do a blog post or where I mention this, but at the end of it, whether I was whether you were a candidate I supported or whether or not I didn't, I still have the greatest admiration for all of you guys that go out there and put yourself up to criticism and to work as hard as you do and do things like ask for money and ask for support.
I don't want you to make it sound like it's
No,
that
I know.
bad.
Well, I know, I'm not, and we've only got 1 minute left. I was trying to be nice, Allison. I was just trying to say that I do a lot of talking about a lot of candidates, but I want you all to know, and anybody who's running know, how much I admire those of you who do it.
And Harris County's huge.
Yeah, it's
huge.
a lot,
It is.
and what you guys, it is a lot, even if you enjoy it. I mean,
I'm not saying I like it.
Yeah.
I'm saying other people should do it.
yeah, no, but it is a lot, but it's worthwhile because I think that at the end of the day, public service is a calling, and it's something that you basically put yourself through a lot in order to have the opportunity to help more people, and I'm just saying that I admire that. And even Allison's pushing back on that. But
Thank you, Murray.
Yeah.
I'll say this. There's one thing that I have loved. When you go out and you meet people across the county, you realize there are a lot of great people in Harris County.
Yeah.
And hearing their opinions about how we do our jobs is enlightening.
So when you bring that up, at the last election when I ran, I got 60,000 votes, and I don't know 60,000 people
That's so
in Harris
cool.
County, so that was awesome. It's a great feeling, I'll tell you. But it is grueling, and Harris County's huge. So yeah.
All right. Well, we've got 30 seconds left, so thank you all for tuning in. Thank you to these wonderful candidates, and no matter who you're voting for, just please get out there and make sure that you vote. These folks deserve your consideration and your time, and it's a right that a lot of people in this world don't have. So thank you for tuning in, and we hope to see you next week.